Well, hello, folks. Welcome to Totally Tank, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. It's December 9th, 2023, and this is episode 53. My name is Rob. I'm joined by...
Hello, I'm John, and Rob hasn't advanced the teleprompter. Today we're talking about the special little unicorn that is the M24 Chaffee, aka Light Tank M24, aka the Panther Pup, the Voting Machine, the Coup Troop. I think that should be Troop, the Coop Troop. Okay, for once the Yanks decided that they'd name a tank themselves rather than let the Brits come up with a name for it. But now it's time to thank our patrons.
And for those listening, 10 seconds before the video started, YouTube gave us an error. So if you catch any buffering or anything else, please let us know in the comments.
And do keep the messages coming in. We've already heard from Antonio A, who was in early from Ottawa. G'day, mate. David, an old friend of the show from Queanbeyan, which is just across the border. Alexander Vlad from Ottawa. Tasman from Sydney. And we've also got Cat Chant 13 from Montana, and Alexander Hodge, Canada as well. The Canadians are representing strongly. Now, the patrons, Rob, the Artificer patrons, we've got Chris Peze, Guy Hook, Maxi Mixed, and Pear. And then our lower level patrons, we've got Anton Gorbanov, Brian Jenkins, Carter Heller, Chris Doyle, Corey, David Mulvaney, Fartmaster, Floaty Burb, Jay Beckman Strauss, Jamie Stokes, Jimmy O, Scotch 12, Spencer Davis, Steve Matthews, and Vikram Murthy. And just want to note we've got a new key light running, and so thank you very much, patrons, for paying for that. That is awesome. And also, we got new t-shirts.
Mine's not one, but anyway.
Although I've got some weird strobing effects on mine. That's very exciting. I might change my shirt in the halftime break, but at the moment I've got the M24.
Must be too much green in your yellow.
Too much green in my yellow.
My yellow is nice and yellow.
Yeah, gee, that could have been a real disaster if it wasn't. But yes, so they're on redbubble.com. They will start conversations with terrifying people. Search for Totally Tanked on Redbubble. So, Rob, let's get into the tank. What do we want to tell people about the M24 Chaffee?
All right, M24 Chaffee, produced from April 1944 to August 1945. They're 4,731 built. Weight 18 tons, length 5 meters, height 3 meters, width 3 meters, height 2.77 meters, so fairly low. The official crew was 4, which was commander, gunner, driver, and assistant driver. Slash radio operator. The assistant driver was also designated as a loader. However, as it had 5 seats and needed 5 people, what they crews in World War II would commonly do is they would bump it up to 5 by grabbing any able-bodied soldier who wasn't doing anything else terribly important and make them jump in and act as loader. So, but officially had a crew of 4, not 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So armor, not much because it's a light tank. 25 mils on the front hull and turret, and only 38 millimeters on the gun mantlet. Of the 19 mils on the rear and sides. The main armament, the main gun was 75 millimeter M6 gun, which was derived from the B-25H Mitchell bomber. Which is a funny little evolution in that, basically they needed a lightweight 75mm gun, and that was exactly what the Army Air Force was up to with the Mitchell, trying to get a decent punch. And I don't think it worked out that well for the Mitchell, but for a light tank, it was like, hey, we can fire proper 75mm ammo with the decent HG. Tell you what, if the Mitchell bomber had run into any other German bombers, that 75 would do some massive...
Yeah, it's not really what bombers are for, though, is it?
No, but how they aimed and fired, that who knows. So it had a thinner barrel, a lightweight gun that could fit in the Chaffee with the reduced recoils in there. They had a clever recoil reduction system where there was tubes and things and clever boffins doing things.
Yeah, clever lightweight recoil system. It was centered around the barrel, so the barrel's pushed back into its whole recoil system. Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting point in that this was not designed to sustain fire for very long.
No, it's a light tank. It's supposed to shoot and scoot. It was still, however, because it was a 75mm gun, it was still capable of taking on enemy armor, preferably from the sides. So yes,
it's normal for any armor engagement, frankly.
But it was also able to use the highly effective 75 HE rounds of the Sherman and the Lee. It carried 48 rounds in the tank. So with the HE rounds, it could then support the infantry as well.
Now, Tasman has commented that it was really good for infantry support. I'm going to argue as we go on it was not good for infantry support, but that's because it couldn't move slow enough to stay with infantry, but we will keep going with that.
There you go. All right. Well, no, it was had a Mardus in a Pindle mount for anti-aircraft.
That's a 50 caliber machine gun for those who don't know and love the
M2.
Browning 50 cal M2. Yep.
And which seems to have it was mounted at the rear of the turret for during World War II, but after later iterations of the tank, they moved it around so the commander could fire it from within his cupola.
There is,
and other people did all sorts of fun and wacky things with it.
There is another issue with machine gun mounts that's coming in with newer tanks, is that they'll actually have multiple mounting points for that weapon. And the reason is that when you're moving in a platoon, you want to cover different quadrants depending on which part where the tank is. So
the T80 the other month had we talked about being able to mount it on any corner of the round turret. There you go, any corner of it. It also had two 30 caliber machine guns, one in the hull for the assistant driver and one in the coax to fire away as well. It had twin Cadillac V8 petrol engines producing 220 horsepower.
Now, everyone mocked Australia taking Cadillac V8s to make our tank work.
We put three of them.
Yeah, when the Americans do it, it's like, oh, this is clever. When we do it, it's desperate. But, you know, they were getting the Cadillac engines built for the tank rather than stripping them out of Cadillacs. So I think that's the difference.
It had hydromatic transmission with 8 speeds forward, 4 reverse, torsion bar suspension, the same as the M18 Hellcat for a smoother ride.
Smoother ride does take up a lot of interior volume and very hard to service. But yes, there's still people holding out for bogie suspension for quite good reason, in that for maintenance it's just bolted on off the side and stick it back on, whereas if a torsion bar breaks, you're fishing bits of torsion bar out of your interior.
Yes. 420 litre fuel tank, giving it an operational range of 160 kilometres, which turns out to be only the same as the M3 M5 Stuart, which it was replacing. The M3s were found to be too short in the Western Desert. So their range was too short in the Western Desert because they basically, while they could catch up to the fleeing German tanks, they couldn't. They'd have to stop and get petrol while they kept on driving away. So, however, the Chaffee was mainly operating Western Europe, so the short range was not much of a shortcoming.
But I've got to say, for a tank that's built from the ground up as a recon tank that is almost incapable of supporting infantry because it can't move slowly enough, that range is really a little short for slashing reconnaissance manoeuvre.
Yes, but that's
what they got. Okay.
That's what they got. Where are we at? The Chaffee has a speed of 35 miles per hour / 56 k's an hour, which is again the same as the M3 M5 Stuart. So not as fast as the Hellcat, but again that was meeting its expectations of this is what we're setting out this tank to be, and this is what we want it to be able to go this fast, survive these sorts of rounds, and have a 75mm gun. And go
75mm gun
and go this distance.
Yeah, the 75mm gun is the functional upgrade from the Stuarts. Yeah. And that's a huge upgrade. Colossal. It moves into a whole different class of usefulness.
Yeah, that hatch, and you'll be able to say that's a Chaffee.
Yeah, I love that octagonal hatch because, when I'm looking for photos to put in the podcast, I'm always worried I'm going to put a wrong photograph in. And for this one, it's like, oh no, this is easy. That's okay. It's me. So, Rob, why did you make me call the Chaffee a special little unicorn?
I'm glad you asked, John. Back when I started playing World of Tanks, which I found out last night was actually 2014, right. The Chaffee was a Tier 5 light tank. Now, normally, light tanks would play up to 3 tiers higher in World of Tanks, so it should be playing tiers 5 to 8. But instead, the Chaffee would only fight in tiers 7 to 10. It was the only tank that did this. This situation intrigued me so much that I had to get this special in the little unicorn. And yes, most tier 10 battles I played in this tier 5 tank I was taken out very quickly. But on the few occasions where everything fell into place, the feeling of beating the odds and kicking the butt with the Chaffee was incredibly satisfying, I've got to say. In the last few years, it's been reverted back to a normal light tank, but when I was driving a Chaffee in World of Tanks, that back then it was the rarest thing, so that's why I made you call it. a special little unicorn.
There we go. And I want to note, World of Tanks has just had their Christmas stream from Bovington.
Yeah, 4 hours of fun and singing and tanks and
4.5 hours with an cast of thousands. You know, we do crank out 3 hours just the two of us. Come on, guy. I mean, we are the Wayne's World of tank videos, but you know, here we are. Also, you know, the Challenger. I mean, no disrespect to the man. I'm sure we'd get on if we met him, and I you know, totally appreciate his work. His podcast is dead tied with us on listen notes for reach and listeners, but we don't get invited to Bovington, and do you know why? Because we don't give the Tank Museum millions of pounds.
No.
All
right. Yes, the Chaffee does make several appearances in Girls and Panzer, and somewhere along the line it acquired a tank telephone. They don't appear in...
Some have them, some don't, I've found in the photos.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Is that they don't appear in a lot of World War II versions, but they're shown on the right rear hull of the French and Norwegian version. So somewhere along the line, somebody said, right, this thing needs a tank telephone, and they've wired it in.
So the M24 Chaffee was named by the Americans, who were sick of the British naming their tanks, after the father of the armoured force, Major General Adna Romanza Chaffee Jr. That's such a beautifully American mid-century name.
Yep, not senior, junior, because
yeah.
Senior was a Civil War general.
Oh,
well, actually, he started out as a private and became a general later after the Civil War.
Yeah, well, which was quite hard to do that. Normally they all went down ranks after the war. Okay, so he was alive from 1884 to 1941. It's kind of a shame they didn't let people have tanks named after them when they were alive. And Chaffee from 1927 saw that mechanized warfare would dominate the next war, became the leading American advocate of mechanized warfare, and led the 7th Mechanized Brigade through the Plattsburgh and Louisiana maneuvers of 1939 to 40. The Louisiana maneuvers were huge for the US Army, where they were able to put things to the test and say, you know what, your horses, they're rubbish, get rid of them. Because before that, the political power of the cavalry, the horse cavalry, meant they were very hard to deal with. And this is why I kind of like talking about tanks, because they actually get tested in the real world. It's not just people hanging on to their strongly held convictions. And most major powers before World War II carried out similar maneuvers. They cost a fortune. They used large numbers of men and material and land. And most countries, they didn't come out to quite the same answers, but they got rid of a lot of really dud ideas that were quite similar at that time. Yeah.
For Tasman, reading in a book years ago that the side of the Chaffee chassis was copied from the Panzer III tank. I haven't heard that, but there you go.
I can see some similarities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for those who want to know, we are drinking Bent Spoke.
Bent.
Bent Spoke.
It's called Bent.
Oh, it's Bent. Beer is called Bent Spoke.
Beer is Bent.
Yes. It's a, what was it called? A normal beer?
Yeah. It's a quaffable ale. Yeah. It's only 4%, which is, frankly, we should have moved to 4% beers or lower for this podcast a long time ago. It's got just enough of a craft beer twang with the hops in it without being overpowering. So for people in Australia, unfortunately, I don't think the rest of the world is ever going to see it. Worth a go if you like more flavourful beers.
All right, so the development. The limitations of the M3, M5 Stuart and the 37mm main gun became quickly apparent in 1942 and 1943. The next iteration was already in the works from 1941, which was the T7, using the same engine and the suspension of the M5 and the gun and the turret of the M4, but was quickly found to be underpowered, overweight at 25 tons, with no improvements to what the Sherman was providing. So in April 43, the Ordnance Corps and Cadillac started work on putting together a lightly armoured tank weighing no more than 20 tons with a 75mm gun by October. So that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
They had their first working pilot.
I mean, it's the classic thing with American tanks all through the war, is that they basically use the same running gear and except this was a torsion tank.
Which the Hellcat had already brought it out, so they said, "Oh, okay, we know it works."
But also understated is that they just figured out a really good track linkage system and kept reusing that as well.
Now, I am wondering what Alexander Vlad means by he's drinking what could be described as the Bob Semple beer. That's
an expensive and bad one. But, Alan's joined us as well. Hello, Alan. We've got a lot of your comments coming up in the second half of the show.
King Tiger wouldn't stand a chance against Chely Savalas in the Spanish desert. No, it's true. This is the reference to the Chafees being used in Battle of the Bulge.
Yes. You mean the movie, not the...
Yes, the movie, yes.
To be fair, when you're trying to make a movie, a light tank all the problems that armies have getting full fat tanks into the field are amplified for people trying to make movies. With what bridges can it get over, all that sort of thing. So
sorry about Vegemite Warriors underage is not drinking beer yet. That's good on you. Drinking your lemonade and enjoy it. Lemonade's a good drink.
Not the hard lemonade.
No.
Careful on that.
All right. So it was where was I? The October 43. The first pilot was brought out and was designed so the chassis could fulfill multiple roles of including specialist vehicles, including various anti-aircraft and self-propelled gun variants, which we'll get onto later.
And some quite exciting mortar variants. We always like mortars.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to say very much big thanks to mikesresearch.com for a great read on the Chaffee and a lot of the major conflicts have been in. That was a good read.
This was the first time Mike's research has come up for me when I'm looking for things, but I don't know who he is or what his story is, but it's a good website with some really good stuff on it, so recommend it. All right, Vegemite Warrior, you're 15, 3 years' time, we'll go.
But don't you can always get yourself a Totally Tanked t-shirt before then. All right, conflicts. First one, World War II. What a
World War
surprise.
II.
This little tank arrived too late. The Chaffies didn't enter the European theatre of operations until November of 44.
Come on, too late is Centurion. This one got there in time to do some stuff.
I know, but it's the same. Anyway, November of 44, and it was difficult to get formations to get them to the front to replace their M5 Stuarts and the armoured divisions, which is because they were literally leading the charge into Germany. So, however, where they were able to be deployed, they were positively received and performed well.
Now, this is probably one of the last times in history a recon tank was able to actually do a pure recon role attached to an armoured division. Being able to be fast and get over the bridges and get out there and get on top of hills and see what's going on, report back, shoot, withdraw, all that sort of stuff. World War II was kind of where it was at for that, and it's light tanks are sort of turning more into mobile gun systems, in modern use. But
I was about to say, as soon as you moved into the MBT, for any of those scouting roles, you probably pushed it down to rather than the CBRs and so forth.
Yeah, and an armoured division would always rather have a completely homogenous fleet of MBTs rather than some funny little tanks on the side. But
but you always need that cavalry / scouting / reconnaissance role. The Chaffies were taken around and deployed to and displayed to the frontline troops so that they would get to know what the look of the new tank, so it wouldn't get mistaken for a Panther, which is where it got the name the Panther Pup, because it's a similar silhouette, I guess, what they were going for. They're saying, don't shoot these ones.
I mean, to the extent that in 1944 that sculpted angular turret was really unusual, I can see why people then would have thought they looked similar.
And most of the American tanks at this stage were Shermans, so nice and tall and rounded on all sorts of edges.
As many people have said, never looked like a funny tank to the Americans.
No. They were deployed in Italy and France, but their main involvement was the advance across Germany. So once they actually entered Germany and started moving across and were taking the German towns, that's where the Chaffies were actually carrying out their role of getting in front of everything, scouting it out, engaging the enemy, and then scooting back, waiting to disrupt any sort of defensive formations or counterattacks that the Germans have, because the Germans always love their counterattacks.
Did the Germans love their counterattacks to the point that it became so monotonously predictable that it was actually a liability to them? But, you've got to fight an enemy for a few years before you're like, well, we've taken this position, they're going to counterattack in an hour. And that's when a counterattack goes in horribly wrong, when the enemy's just expecting you at a certain time. Yeah.
All right. Alexander Vlad wants us to have a wing in Bovington so we can do the TR-85.
Look, if we want to have a wing in Bovington named after us, the patrons we've got, you guys are doing your job. Everyone else is going to need to really start chipping in on the Patreon front if we're going to sponsor a room in Bovington.
Yeah. The Chaffies were also part of the victory parade through Berlin with the Comets and the IS-3s. So it was all part of the pomp and ceremony of the end of the war. And then we move into post-war in Korea, being the first situation. So the M24s were stationed in Japan as part of, were the first to be deployed to Korea when the North invaded.
For the same reason that they were used everywhere throughout their careers, because they were the tank you could get where you needed a tank.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were in Japan as part of the occupational force.
But again, because little tiny Japanese bridges.
Yes,
And,
yes. They wanted something light that could go over Japanese bridges and roads and everything else. However, the lightly armed M24s were not up to the task of taking on the North Korean T-34-85s.
Now, if I was a Chaffee designer in, I don't know, 1943, and then in 1951 someone's saying, these tanks are garbage, they can't deal with a T-34-85, I'd be saying, you're an idiot. This tank was never designed to take on a T-34-85.
No, it was designed to scout it and then run away and have somebody else kill it.
We have got a picture in the slideshow, I think it was just on there, of a line of Chafees deployed hull down behind a railway line. And that's where you actually see with the angling on the turret, when they're hull down that way, the turret angling was providing an enormous amount of protection. But, you know, you got to be lucky to get those kind of defensive positions, and if you stay in that defensive position, you're going to get cleaned up by artillery. So, you know, there are limits to what you can achieve with that.
And they were so underprepared when being sent to Korea that for combat that they mainly had smoke and practice rounds with them, with only some HE and very few anti-tank rounds. So it's not really their fault that they didn't perform, because they couldn't stop. There's no way they could have stopped it anyway with that. So it's not the way to stop an invasion with practice rounds.
Look, the start of the Korean War was a huge shock to the you know, the Americans essentially, and to the world in general in a lot of ways. The way it went down. But it was, you know, desperate fighting with what they had to maintain the Pusan perimeter, which was a tiny, you know, postage stamp of Korean land, until MacArthur, and probably the best thing MacArthur ever did, the Incheon landings. You know, absolutely inspired and you know, reliant on Japanese Navy, re-enlisted Japanese Navy to drive the landing craft. And they had to strip every embassy in the world of Marines to make the Incheon landings. Anyway, sorry, that's not tank related, but it's
no, we'll get plenty of non-tank related stuff for the Chafees as well. Anyway, however, as the conflict progressed and the more UN tanks arrived, including Australian-bought chieftains that we didn't get until after the war.
Centurions.
Sorry. Centurions, yeah, that's what I meant. Everybody knew that.
If we'd taken chieftains to Korea, that would have been awesome.
All right, and the ascendancy moved back and forth. The speed and mobility of the Chaffee proved valuable to the UN forces defending the south. On Mike's research, there is a great photo of a Chaffee driving south out of Seoul across the last pontoon bridge as the city is taken by the North for the second time in January of 1951, with the blur of the speed of the photo conveying the desperation to get out of town before the North Koreans Chinese by this stage, come racing back into Seoul. Then we move into Indochina.
I love the Indochina stuff with this tank. In fact, it's for me. I mean, obviously, I've put a Vietnamese flag into our design for the t-shirts and this episode. Anyway, we'll get to the voting machine stuff, but let's run through
so much
this.
more before then. Yeah. Right. So what's fun is that near the end of World War II, the Japanese, who had taken Indochina, had declared all the colonies independent nations prior to the war's end. And
they didn't do it well. They thought they were going to hang on to them. They only did it as they were fleeing.
Yeah. Ho Chi Minh, that grand old man of communism, was
Uncle Ho. I've seen Ho Chi Minh.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
His body.
His body.
I'm not that old.
He was helping the Allies in Vietnam, but once Japan surrendered, the British rearmed the Japanese soldiers so they could help suppress the Vietnamese population from resisting the return of the colonial French.
And it's one of the great counterfactuals of history is Ho Chi Minh. Yes, he founded the Vietnamese Communist Party in 1930. He was in the Soviet Comintern meetings of the 1920s. So the man was definitely communist for a long time, probably more because he was keen on the anti-colonial agenda than anything. But in the Versailles peace conference at the end of World War One, he was desperately trying to get the attention of the Americans because basically he would have taken help from anywhere to free Vietnam from the yoke of French colonialism. And if people in the West had taken him more seriously then, we could have saved...
And not just betrayed the agreements they made in Helsinki and other places and said, oh, look, we agreed to all this stuff. Except as soon as you fly back to Hanoi, no, we're going to renege on all the deals.
Yeah, but if they'd taken Ho Chi Minh seriously, millions of people would not have died, and it's very sad.
Yeah. France was wanting to get back into the game of being a major player and needed troops. So they recruited any ex-Nazis who wanted a new life to go back to win their...
We did talk about when we did the Panther how the very suspiciously the French Foreign Legion said, "Oh, we can operate Panthers. We know all about operating Panthers."
Yeah, they sent them back to win back their rubber plantation colony for them. The US initially saw this as the inevitable fall of a colonial empire and wanted nothing to do with the French in Indochina.
It's really annoying how the Americans were very good in terms of being anti-colonial. That was a real strong point of American foreign policy at this time. But then they just lost their minds anytime there was a hint of communism anywhere. And, anyone who was fighting against colonialism was probably going to be quite open to some communist ideas.
Yeah, redistribution of wealth, yeah. So, and that was the trigger of it was when North Korea invaded the South. The French suddenly got a whole lot more support from the Americans who wanted to stop the tide of communism from rolling around.
I mean, the big moment for American foreign policy was the fall of China. In 1949, because losing China was seen as this enormous failure of American foreign policy, and in many ways it was, although it is hard to argue that China has not been better off under Mao and his successors than it would have been under Chiang Kai-shek.
The times and places,
Chiang Kai-shek was awful. The Kuomintang in China was awful. So, yes. And so now we get to Dien Bien Phu.
Dien Bien Phu, that fun little place.
I've been getting people messaging me all week saying, "Are you going to talk about Dien Bien Phu? You're going to talk about Dien Bien Phu?" I'm like, yes, we are.
Yes, we are. All right, so 10 Chafees were flown into the base by 6 C-47 Dakotas and 2 Bristol freighters.
Now, I think the Bristols...
The front openings.
Yeah, I thought they were Beverleys they used, but anyway, that's fine.
Well, what I was reading said Bristol freighters. Anyway, and they had to break them down into 100 pieces, 180 pieces, and the Bristol freighters actually had to strip out everything else that didn't make the plane fly, so that it could get over the hills of the Tonkin province to be able to get into Dien Bien Phu. So it's a pretty isolated place.
in many ways, moving your whole army into the isolated valley, is, I've literally used it as an analogy for building your own failure before in this podcast. So the French took themselves into the Dien Bien Phu Valley, sat there, managed to get their tanks in there, which again
and put them back together again. Yeah. And they're all working.
Now.
They and put them back together for the battle, which started in March of 1954, I want to say. And by May, they had lost. Number of them took a number of bazooka hits and 57mm recoilless rocket rounds.
They were
and kept on going.
They were surprisingly durable for the amount of damage they took.
They fired 15,000 rounds or something in that 5-week period.
Oh, the French couldn't keep them supplied.
No,
the French couldn't keep anyone supplied.
But the thing is, they were a stalwart of the battlefield. It's just there was no way with the situation, the tactical situation they'd gotten themselves into, that the French were going to win that. And the French lost, and things changed. That was the turning point.
It was very much the end of the Vietnam War. Now, we do have in the slideshow a picture of one of the M24s that fought at Dien Bien Phu, which the Vietnamese have mounted as a trophy on the battlefield.
Left it there.
And it's got a little plaque in front of it, and it's on a plinth.
Well, that's to stop it from collapsing.
Oh yeah, its tracks are sort of hanging slack on it. But there it is, and just reminds me, the ancient Greeks did this sort of stuff when they won a battle. They'd take one of their enemy's top general's armor and mount it on a stick, and just to say, "We won. Here's your armor." And the idea, I don't know if ancient Indochina did the same thing. I've tried to look it up, but it's a very old human reflex to do this, and it's just magnificent that the Vietnamese have commemorated the battlefield in that way. I did not get up to Dien Bien Phu when I was in Vietnam. They did offer tours, but it was a couple of days.
Yeah. All right. The next big battle of the M24 Chaffee was the Tokyo Kaiju battle versus Godzilla.
Ooh.
Gojira.
Gojira.
In 1954. It subsequently went on to take on other kaiju, including Rodan, a titanic pterosaur, and Mothra. And it was kept on fighting these kaiju up until 1973.
When movie studios have got a couple of tanks, they're going to keep using them.
Yeah. So two Chafees would take position in front of Godzilla's path and fire upon the monster. However, Godzilla would destroy the road in front of them with his atomic breath and continue his advance. They even fought a Danish kaiju named Reptilicus.
I mean, Danish kaiju sound rubbish.
I know.
If you haven't got the nuclear testing to, juice them up, yeah.
But the fact is, the Chafees were out there taking on the kaiju and trying to save the world from them. So that's that. The reason the Chafees were in Japan, of course, was part of the Allied occupational forces after the war, as its lightweight was more suited to Japanese roads and bridges. And they were subsequently, after the occupation forces left, they were then given to the Japanese self-defense forces to say, here is something to drive around.
If the Soviet lands, you will do exactly as well as the, was it Taskmore Smith did?
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, but again, we get back to the point with light tanks. They cannot take on a heavier tank in one-on-one combat. Well, they can get lucky, but they shouldn't be used that way. But they can get to fights that no other heavier tanks can't get to.
Yes.
I'm sorry if I'm boring people because I keep saying that, but it's a really important point. Yes, and then we get to the main Vietnam War. Yep. Actually, a little bit before that.
Yep. So South Vietnam, which is where it got the name the voting machine, from 1955 to 1963, they were used to make sure people voted the right way or to replace governments via coup. So that's why they're also called the coup troop. As they would go around, and basically they...
Marshal Key in particular was very keen on informing people of how to vote with his Chafees. And it's worth noting, so 63 they got rid of the Chafees. 65 was when the US formally entered the war with the Marines landing at Da Nang. It's a complicated bit of history, and I actually read a lot of it to do this podcast and then realized most of what I was reading wasn't useful. But because when the Marines landed, they landed as if they were making an opposed landing on the beach.
Which is what they learned from North Africa, various places, Italy, various places, saying, okay, just always assume it's going to be...
But the Vietnamese government was quite surprised that the Marines were making an opposed landing, but at the same time they had banners up saying "Welcome Marines," and it was South Vietnam was not a unitary state. I mean, they had independent warlords doing all sorts of things, and then the CIA got involved and made all that worse.
No, did they? Really? No.
Yeah.
CIA wouldn't do that. No.
Anyway, after 1963, the Chafees were mostly turned into stationary pillboxes with their engines removed so they couldn't be used for more coups.
Yes. Except there was 10 kept by the South Vietnamese Air Force Defense Ground Forces, basically, in order so that the general of the Air Force could
maybe do a coup
if he felt like it. Basically, he said, no, I'm keeping mine. Thank you very much. Then we move on to, so yes, they saw action there. And then we move into the Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971. Saw Pakistani Chafees used to try and suppress East Pakistan, soon to be Bangladesh.
Henry Kissinger's died since our last episode.
Yes.
And the miserable oppression of some of the poorest people on earth in Bangladesh was one of Henry Kissinger's many, many crimes against humanity. It's worth noting George Harrison from the Beatles funded an enormous aid effort for Bangladesh in this period. And George Harrison is also the person who funded Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Yes.
because he said, "I want to see this movie," and how much money do you need? So George Harrison,
remember, he would have only been
in his 40s.
32 type thing.
Yeah.
When no, he wasn't. He would have been early 30s when Life of Brian was coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just thought I'd mention that George Harrison, as the least remembered Beatle, actually was involved in quite a lot of serious stuff, doing some good things.
I watched the Beatles documentary from Peter Jackson, and all I could think of was he's 24 here. He started in the Beatles when he was 15. He's 24 and he's choosing to leave the biggest band in the world, and you're going, what kind of decisions are you making like at 24, that type of thing?
Bad ones. Lots and lots of bad ones, Rob.
Anyway, we're going to.
And I would recommend bad decisions to every 24-year-old listening. Well, just not ones that are. There's bad and there's catastrophically bad.
Yeah, don't invade West Pakistan. There you go. All right. So, sorry, East Pakistan. So yes, the West Pakistani military government was using Chaffees to suppress the popular uprisings against their rule in what's soon to be Bangladesh. This conflict then led to the Indo-Pakistan War of the same year, as the Indian military got involved, and the Pakistani Chafees were overmatched by the Indian T-55s and PT-76s.
No, I got to say, if a T-34-85 is too much for a Chaffee, a T-55 is incredibly too much.
Now, Tasman's asking us, have we seen the Indian movie Pepper yet, which represents the PT-76s versus the Chaffee at the Battle of Garipur?
No,
I have not.
And I meant to tell you that Tasman had tipped us off about that. Thank you, Tasman. The fact we haven't got that in the show is our fault, not yours. But we appreciate
John's
the
fault,
tip.
not mine.
Yeah, it's ours. It's our fault.
All right. However, there was the Battle of Kushida. Kushtia, sorry, where a squadron of Chafees ambushed a column of PT-76s.
PT-76s were an amphibious vehicle? Yeah.
Yep. That's why you have them. And with a...
That's a perfect vehicle for a Chaffee.
Yeah. and the accompanying infantry for no losses. So basically, they smashed them up.
What is it? Ambush is murder and murder is fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. The Ifni War of Spain with French support against Morocco in 1957. When Morocco gained independence from Spain and France in 1956, the Sultan declared that all Spanish colonies in Morocco/Northwest Africa should be returned to Morocco, including the city of Sidi Ifni. Spain's 31 Chafees were deployed to the conflict, but supposedly were not well liked by their crews, which is surprising because everybody else seemed to have liked.
The Moroccan desert could be, and I mean, I shared a room in London with a deserter from the Spanish Legion who'd been in one of the little enclaves that they've still got on the Moroccan coast. He was an absolute prick. So, yeah.
There you go. Maybe it's just them. Maybe they're not very good people.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Chafees survived that conflict. They were able to. There was peace deals made, and the various little colonies were handed over eventually. Some of them took another 12 years. All right. Now we get on to that was conflict. Now we get to the fun game of internal oppression role of the Chaffee. Uruguay, once a proud symbol of the nation of the Chafees. They received 17 Chafees, and they were first seen as in 1957. They were first seen as a proud symbol of the nation. However, they soon became a tool of the civic and military dictatorship when they carried out the 1973 coup.
Voting machines once again.
Yep. There was one Chaffee of the 17 which had a dozer blade attached. And it was very successful at knocking down street blockades, enabling the military to round up opposition protesters and disappear them. So,
I mean, they must have been pretty crappy blockades because a 220 horsepower petrol engine is not your first choice for that kind of work. But, okay, maybe if it worked, it worked.
Yep. The French colonies in North Africa and Algeria, as well as Indochina, they were used. The Chafees were used there to put down, uprisings against the French colonial masters. Probably Portugal as well, as they had a military dictatorship. In fact, I wanted to say probably everyone who bought Chafees used them at some sort of oppression. And yes, I'm looking at you, Canada, and your Coastal GasLink operation.
Yeah. We've got an unusual number of Canadians on the line.
Well, they should know about the Coastal GasLink operation as well.
We see your tar sands and your shale oils, you environmental wreckers. Not that Australia can be in any way critical of anyone else.
No, but we're throwing stones. It doesn't mean we live in a glass house, but we're throwing stones.
We live in the glassiest of glass houses. Yeah.
All right, let's get on to the operators. Former operators, because everybody has since retired their...
Finally
retired their Chaffies.
Some of them were 60 years in service. But
2019, 2018, the Uruguay finally said, yeah, you know what? Brazil's given us these M41 Bulldogs. We'll start using those, and we'll retire the Chaffies that we've got in the armoured training school. We can go from there. Anyway, the United States, yes, well, they had a few. The Soviet Union received 2 Chaffies through Lend-Lease. The UK they ordered 900, but they only got 300 delivered before the end of the war. Australia, we trialled 2 of them in jungle warfare in 1945.
Now, this is where my point comes through that the Chaffee was not a good infantry support tank comes from. If you want to Google it, the Australian War Memorial has video from the trials in 1945 in Bougainville.
Just like we did for the Churchill, and their good 20-minute watch with the... Yeah.
But the Churchill at least could rumble along at walking pace, which is in jungle warfare all that you're actually going to advance along. And the Chaffee's gearbox was just terrible at... it kept hunting for gear at the speeds that it was being asked to move at, which... What's so bad about hunting for gear? Well, if you're maintaining a fleet of them, constant hunting for gear turns into the hell of a lot of wear and tear. So we basically did what we kept doing, which is going back to the Matilda 2 as the only tank that actually worked in jungle warfare. Even though it lacked a high explosive round in its main gun, and even though it ran on a pair of ancient bus engines, although, as we said way back in the Matilda 2 episode, which is our very first one, bus engines have the advantage that bus technicians can service them.
Oh, and for those who haven't seen, please jump in the poll and start voting. As at the moment, the Chaffee is rated 100% good.
100% good tank.
There you go. So if anybody else wants to have their say on the matter, please jump in.
That's folks on the YouTube stream. Don't worry, podcast listeners. We totally aware you are our bread and butter.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So the Australian trialled 2 Chaffies in Bougainville in 1945. Once and with the Matilda 2 as the comparison vehicle. However, they decided the Chaffee did not meet the requirements. The Australian War Office concluded that these tanks under trial proved that although their mechanical ability was outstanding and their armament ideal for such a role, their light armour and inability to maintain constant slow speed consistent with infantry pace rendered them unsuitable for service under tropical conditions. There you go. All right, France got 1,254 vehicles.
That is an enormous number for France. Before we did the show, Rob was asking me, where did the Israelis get their ones from? I was like, I'm guessing they came from France.
Yeah.
France supplied a ton of stuff to Israel in the early part of their history.
Now, France isn't... I mean, NATO was formed in 1950-something or other.
Although the Atlantic Charter existed before that as...
but France is no longer part of NATO. They want to do their own... want to be able to do their own thing.
Until de Gaulle became president, I think.
There you go. So I don't know about that one. Anyway, so these their 1,200 Chaffies were purchased through NATO, so from the Americans. And then they deployed them all around the world because they were trying to maintain their
colonies, which is why France 1,200 of them, Belgium 224. Now Denmark, not too many colonies, although Greenland maybe. Greece bought 170. Now,
well, just remember that at this point in time, they were also trying to give away tanks so that if the Russians came through the North German plains or the Fulda Gap, there'd be something, even though if they weren't going to do
Although I would love to see the 63 Danish Chaffies facing the T-55s in the Fulda Gap assault.
I'm sure that would have been for their cavalry squadrons, and I'm sure they had their... patterns and M48s issued to them as well, so...
Yeah. Now Greece bought 170. For Greece, they're a perfect tank because if you're coming to bounce on and off ferries and up and down,
steep hills.
Greece goes from coastline to steep hills and back, and that's kind of the whole country. So that's quite good, and they became coastal gun emplacements. Not sure about a 75mm tank gun as a coastal gun emplacement, but I guess it's better than nothing. Italy, kind of similar terrain to Greece, 518. Netherlands, now, we've got a bunch of pictures of horrible colonial use by the Dutch going in the slideshow. And, we think of the Netherlands as lovely, enlightened people these days, but geez, they ran some nasty colonial empires. Although, as English speakers, let us not be too critical of other people's colonial empires.
Their 50 came from ex-British tanks rather than through NATO. Norway, they got 123 in service from the 1950s. However, their last Chaffies were taken out of service in 1993. So they figured out ways to keep on using theirs. Portugal got 16 through NATO. So again, Portugal.
Just enough to terrorise Timor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I couldn't find anything about where they were pressing their colonial empires with their.
They were probably lucky they weren't at Goa when the Indians invaded. So,
or if they were just using them internally to maintain their dictatorship.
So the Portuguese dictator, the Salazar dictatorship, was probably glad just to go, because for a civilian population, a Chaffee is as useful as a heavy tank, and there's nothing they can do to stop it, and it can kill them. Yeah. So Turkey, 238. That's a bit light on for a Turkish armour purchase, but I guess they might have been using them in a proper, reconnaissance regiment sense. Yep.
And the Spanish 31 that we were talking about before, going into the IFNI War. Japan, they entered service in 1952, provided to the Japanese Self-Defense Force by the US Occupational Forces. And the last ones were taken out of service in 1974 after the Kaiju invasions had been suppressed. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah, well.
So for Tokyo, at any rate.
Philippines, 7 Chaffies. 7! It's getting real orphan fleet territory there, isn't it? Well, you're lucky to keep one running at that kind of numbers.
But I mean, they had the Stuarts. There's the main thing. They were still running around with the Stuarts. So obviously their recon company they must have been the top class guys to getting the proper light tanks rather than a M5 Stuart running around the islands. They did take part in the Korean War. They were part of the UN forces of the Korean War, and their Chaffies went up there.
This is where things get really sucky for the Americans because, just whenever they have a conflict, everyone wants to send a really small, useless detachment to get some practice. It's like, oh, you're sending 7 Chaffies. Thanks. We need armoured divisions, but here's 7 light tanks. Let's figure out what to use.
I think they lost 2 of them there. Well, 2 known to be on static display in Lingayen. Anyway, I'm not going to say those words.
Lingayen, there we go, in the Philippines.
South Korea got 22 Chaffies that were used for training of the 55th Tank Company of the Army in late 1952, and for a temporary time. Later, those they were given to Taiwan. There you go.
Yeah. And 22 tanks in Taiwan again. You need bigger formations for what they need. But
again, it might be a training thing. Who knows?
Or coups.
Yeah. South Vietnam. So this is the 1954 to 1975 government of South Vietnam. 137.
What happened in 1975 to South Vietnam? Right?
They disappeared.
They ceased to exist.
Yep.
But I remember their flag. I'm wearing it on my chest. I imagine I'm going to have some interesting conversations with South Vietnamese exiles at some point in this country. But yes, go on.
Alexander Vlad's talking about the Dutch Royal Shell drilling for shoe polish all around the world to maintain their strategic shoe polish reserve.
Yes, it's funny how the Dutch have held on to the oil business. Yes.
All right. So yes, South Vietnam and Americans.
I'm not sure the French gave anything away, but
No,
certainly the Americans did.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Vietnam, the actual nation of Vietnam, after the conquest of the People's Republic, the Republic of South Vietnam in 1975, got all the ones that were left, and again, I've just used them as basically showing them around the place to say, yep, these are the tanks of our oppressors that we've destroyed and now kicked out of the country. Cambodia, 36 were purchased, I'm assuming from the French prior to after 1955, and Laos, 4 were purchased. So when those countries were given independence from, basically broken out of Indochina, French Indochina, and became their own countries again. They were probably the governments there that were set up, or puppet governments that were set up, were probably told, here, buy these and give us money. Thailand, 20 were purchased. And while we
Thais love a good coup.
Yeah, they do. They do. I'm sure they will use for that. So Tasman, are you saying that we are being buffered?
No, we buffered for a bit, but we're back.
Okay,
But,
great.
yeah.
Canada, 32 purchased by the Canadian government in 1947. So they didn't actually operate any of them in World War II, except possibly as part of Commonwealth forces. But they bought their own in 32 in 1947. Chile received 21 from the USA in the 1960s.
That was quite a production. If anyone wants to look into it, Chile was under a lot of embargoes because they were allowing socialists to run their government. Rob.
What?
It might have led to communism. The fact that Chile is always worried about being invaded by Argentina. In fact, I mean, South American military history is.
Did they give them so that Pinochet could then stage a coup?
Well, maybe.
Was it logistics, forward logistics? So they were providing the tanks that were going to stage the coup in coming years?
I looked at it. There was a lot of really complicated stuff. Some of them came from Israel at that point as well. And we can't even figure out where Israel got their Chaffies from. But right. Yeah. So that's there's a lot of interesting stuff there that we frankly don't understand. Partly because we don't speak Spanish. But Uruguay also had 17 from the US in 1957, and they hung around till 2018, but they're gone now.
Yep.
They basically knew the Totally Tank podcast was starting in 2019, and they're like, "No, gotta go, gotta get that out."
Ethiopia, they purchased 34. Haven't seen no details. Madagascar, 380. Again, I'm assuming this is the French divesting themselves of tanks to their colonies and saying, "Here, you have to pay for these, and we're going to give them to you." So
380 is a useful number, though, and Madagascar's good light tank terrain. Yep. So, sensible stuff. But,
and they're in active service from 1956 to 1987. And they took some of the turrets of the M24 tanks and whacked them on top of the PT-76B chassis of vehicles they had.
Yeah, right.
And they purchased. Again, but hang on. It says it's purchased through the United States rather than through France. I don't know. Strange.
Yep. I mean, there is also an issue that France could have bought them, and then someone else wanted to buy them, and they had to be sold technically through the US as the point of origin.
I understand what you're saying there.
I'm not saying that's what happened there.
Foreign military sales and end user license agreements and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
That is speculation before anyone gets upset.
If anybody wants to tell us what it actually was, happy to learn.
Yeah.
Pakistan, they had 134 captured from the Pakistan army. Iran and Iraq. Iran had 180. Iraq had 78.
Now, bear in mind, Iran was a British puppet state, becoming an American puppet state up until 1979. So you've got to remember that the geopolitics shifted very radically on that. Yeah.
But, however, they're both listed as having them, but they couldn't see anything about them taking part in any of their various conflicts in the 80s. So...
It's not great light tank country. It's real proper tank country, Iran, Iraq. There's a couple of big rivers and then a lot of plains. Yeah. All right. Saudi Arabia, 52. That seems like a token purchase to just make someone happy and keep the oil flowing.
Israel, as we were saying before, they used Chaffee turrets on AMX-13 hulls and have Chaffies in their tank museum, but we're still not sure how they got hold of them and where they came from. Because, again, we think that because there's no Chaffies listed as being given to Syria, Lebanon, or Egypt, but that's probably the most likely place that they came from. So, or the French sold them to them, and then because there were situations where we were having Chaffies with AMX-13 turrets on them fighting AMX-13 hulls with Chaffee turrets on them.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that during the AMX-13 episode, but I couldn't find that reference again.
Yeah, now if there's anyone left in Israel listening to us, because I know we've upset you guys lately, we did used to have an Israeli tank captain who listened and sent us little notes when we got things wrong. We'd love to know if you could tell us where the Israeli Chaffies came from. We'll put it in the next episode because we did actually do a pretty intensive search of some very big documents, and it's just they definitely had them. And
they've got them in the museum.
It's just not clear where they came from, and that's more a we don't know, not a it's a mystery.
It's just that we couldn't find it in the time that we had to putting all this together. All right, the variants of the Chaffee. The M19 multiple gun motor carriage lengthened the M24 hull with the engine moved to the centre, and twin Bofors guns mounted at the rear. Pop, 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 pop. They ordered 904 of them in August 44, but only 285 were completed by the end of the war. Yeah, so we're getting back to World War II territory here. That's one of the anti-aircraft guns versions of it. Then we go into one of the M37 105 millimeter howitzer motor gun carriage developed in 1945, carrying a 105 mil howitzer, was intended to replace the M7 Priest. 448 were ordered, 316 delivered, and they saw service in the Korean War. The M41 howitzer motor carriage Gorilla nicknamed the Gorilla, 155.
We've got one of those in the slideshow.
155 howitzer mounted at the rear.
That's a big gun.
That's a big gun for a little chassis. It's not a heavy tank. It's mounted at the rear. 250 ordered, only 85 produced, and again they saw service in the Korean War, with some exported to France. The T-77 multiple gun motor carriage had 650 cals mounted on a newly designed turret. However,
there we go, right there.
No, that's the Bofors.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
the Bofors. That's the pop-pops.
Yeah. Oh well, sorry.
Yep. That's the we're now seeing on the screen the T-77 with the 650 cals and going daka daka daka. However,
in terms of actually shooting down a plane, I'd take the Bofors.
Yeah.
But
and the 650 cals were a bit obsolete in the new jet age of air warfare by the time it came out.
We've talked about this before, but the point of a 50 cal in an anti-air roll is simply that it forces the pilots up a few thousand feet higher, and that's actually really valuable because they're unlikely to hit you if they're that much higher.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There are a couple of cargo tractors. The T-42 and the T-43 had a torque converter transmission from the M18 Hellcat, and the T9 had bulldozer kit installed. Additionally, the M38 Wolfhound prototype armoured car was experimentally fitted with an M24 turret. So I'm guessing that's replacing the Greyhound scout car with the 37mm gun, with a bigger 75mm gun in the M24 turret. All right, foreign variants.
Foreign variants. Here we go, Rob. The foreign variants.
Norway. The NM 116 in 1972, the Norwegian army took 54 of their Chaffies and rebuilt them as Panzerjägers, tank hunters, and designated them as NM 116.
There was a reasonable amount in the 70s of lots of countries saying, well, we've got these moderately fast light tanks, let's turn them into tank destroyers with a big gun and no armor. And they didn't last very long. I mean, the whole idea of a big gun tank destroyer went the way of the dodo as anti-tank missiles came into the field. But this was definitely one of a series of those. Sorry, Rob's just pouring out the last of the beer for himself. Thanks, Rob. That's right. Thanks, mate.
We have other beers, John. We have other beers. Yeah. All right. Oh, well, it's be silly just to not using. Anyway, the NM 116, as it would cost less than a third of getting new tanks to fulfil the new role for what Norway was wanting, as Norway hadn't yet discovered its offshore gas fields yet. And so it was not as rich as they are now. They installed a diesel engine used from the M113 and replaced the gun with a French low-pressure 90mm gun, which basically it gave it the ability to penetrate up to T-55s, essentially, is what they were looking at.
Look, if you're in the Norwegian army, life's a bit miserable because, the Norwegian Navy's anti-submarine forces is pretty much the only branch of their whole military that anyone's spending any money on. But, if you can get up and down the mountains and the fjords, then you're off to a good start in Norway, I guess. Yeah.
They removed the assistant driver in favour of more ammunition. What a surprise. They put in the new fire control system and a heater, and gave it a laser rangefinder, installed a tank telephone, which we talked about before, but it might have already been there. Moved the 50 cal pintle mount from the rear of the turret to in front of the commander. They also converted 8 of theirs to armoured recovery vehicles. They were finally retired from service in 1993.
That's a country that's not planning to use its armour in a real fight.
No. They were they were one of the first signees of NATO saying, yep, somebody else, all we're going to do is hold out until somebody else gets here. Yeah. No. Other variants. Chile converted their Chaffies to a 60mm hypervelocity medium support.
Hypervelocity sounds exciting, Rob. It sounds like it's got more lethality.
It does. So it was an Israeli design, and it was basically brought...
Which the Israelis did not actually use themselves. Yeah. This is the HVMS, the hypervelocity medium support. That was the stuff that was coming up a lot in searches about Israel and Chaffees. Yeah.
Right, okay. Which made the gun equivalent to a 90mm gun. They operated their versions through till 1999. Uruguay finally retired their modernised M24s, which had new engines, 76mm guns, which can fire armour-piercing and APFSDS rounds. In the 1950s,
Uruguay really invested heavily in their Chafees.
They only had 17. They were just going to keep
Mind you, the amount Australia invested in life extensions on the M113, we can't be too critical of other people over investing in their
the ones that
decrepit armour.
The ones we're still going with,
60
years after they were introduced. All right, in the mid-50s, the French swapped the turret with an AMX 13 90mm gun, and the AMX 13 variants with Chaffee turrets also existed. And as we were saying, fought against each other somewhere in Israel, Syria, or Egypt. Can't remember exactly. We'll have to re-listen to the AMX episode. In the late 1960s, Japan modified a single M24 with 4 anti-tank guided missiles in order to improve its anti-tank capabilities.
Which is kind of getting to what the British were doing at the same time with their CVRTs. Yeah.
All right. So, and this is my little fun part of the legacy of the tank, of what I feel like. As with most US tanks, the Chaffee's dependability and ability to be just good enough to carry out its job made it a great light tank. As with most post-war light tanks, its lightweight, protection from small arms, ability to cross bridges and maneuver through built-up or non-urban environments made it ideal for installing and protecting military dictatorships throughout the Cold War. So basically, it was defender of capitalist dictatorships, John.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Or overthrower of socialist...
it's
People's Republic.
We probably still have to grapple a little more with the failure of Western governments and what we have done, and it's just promoting powerful people making more money, or people who've already got all the money making more money. But Rob, we need to stop bloating the show with our opinions. Tanks.
We have lots of opinions. Nobody has to actually listen to them.
Yeah, nobody does have to listen to them, and that's why we will continue in our own little show that we make ourselves to share our opinions, despite what certain people put in the comments. Although we're going to go through a year's worth of comments in the second half of the show, and quite a few people on the line are going to see their comments come up. So hang around, guys. I don't think we've got any women on at the moment. Sometimes we do, but anyway. I do just love the idea, though, that some people just get really upset that someone out there has an opinion that's different to their own. And we are a celebration of diverse opinions.
Yes.
And on that note...
as John will say stasis, and the word is stasis. Obviously,
I said stasis, but anyway.
For those who want to listen to his other podcast.
In the Culture Books podcast. Yes. What we're going to do right now is go to our halftime show, which involves an interview with a friend of the show and long-term friend of mine, Hugh Cullimore, about the Murrayville Tank Graveyard. The pictures are excellent and the conversation's not too bad either. And then we'll be back in about 20 minutes to talk a little bit about Ukraine and Gaza, and a little bit about just the end of the year in general, and mostly about things you folks have had to say about the show through the year. So,
proper beer review.
What beer has Rob brought for the beer review section?
You'll have to hang around until after the halftime break.
An American tank. Now, Alan has suggested that it must be Uruguayan beer, but Alan, Uruguay operated M24s. If this was a true Rob special, there's a map going around in the slideshow somewhere. There must be somewhere.
Bangladeshis.
Here we go. So we are joined now by my good friend Hugh Cullimore, and for people, just as some background, Hugh and I have an unusual distinction relevant to this podcast, that we have both worked at the same time together in a brewery and in a war museum. And also we have shared a house, and we have gone to a regional Burning Man together. We're a member of a bicycle club together. And once Hugh threw a birthday party for my dog so that he could get the girl who lived across the road, the young woman who lived across the road, to come and hang out with him. And I would note that it was not actually my dog's birthday. So Hugh, welcome to the show.
I've completely forgotten about that. Oh, wow. No, thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Thank you for joining us. Now, the reason in particular we brought you on isn't just to reminisce about house parties of yesteryear. But Hugh, you have been through the Murrayville Tank Graveyard. And I'm going to put the slideshow up now and start scrolling through it. But if you could set the scene for the viewers and the listeners about where the hell Murrayville is and what is there for the tank enthusiast.
So Murrayville is a tiny little town just on the Victorian side of the Victorian South Australian border. It's on the Mallee Highway between a little town called Uyen and the South Australian border. There is pretty much nothing in the town, so sorry for any Murrayville residents that I might have just offended. But yeah, there's pretty much, it's a typical little Aussie town. There's a pub, there's like a servo, but on the way out of town, there's a newly built servo or petrol station for non-Australian viewers.
Or gas station for the Americans, yep.
Gas station, yeah. And this one's an unattended one. But it's
now,
on the site where...
I've never encountered an unattended service station before, so can you just... I think people can grasp the concept from the name, but just walk us through what's involved to use it.
Yeah, so it's just a couple of big tanks, and you can see the shot that just came on screen of the prices of the petrol. And yeah, you just sort of turn up, you take the fuel that you need, you pay with your credit card or your debit card, and you drive off. So I think we'll be seeing more and more of those through rural Australia. But so for the last 10 years, sort of my family live in South Australia. I studied and worked in Canberra. So I drive between the two a couple of times a year. And Murrayville's on that journey. Now, as you're passing out of Murrayville on the Victorian side, there was a field. And this field had tank remnants, car remnants, all sorts of machinery. But just recently, with the building of this unattended service station, they seem to have ordered the tanks. So they're now all in a line. So as you park up to get your fuel, you're flanked by these 6 shelves, and you can walk around them now. And you know, previously they were sort of inaccessible; they were sort of blocked in by the scrub. But yeah, now you can stick your head in, take photos, and it doesn't feel like you're trespassing on anyone's land. Look, as you can see from the photos, they're pretty beat up, but you know,
did there used to be more tanks? Did there used to be more tanks in the tank graveyard out there? I've heard stories that there used to be about 200 or something.
Look, I've heard those stories, but for the past sort of 10 years that I've been driving through, it seems to have been these core 6. But there are plenty of parts as well in the field behind. So you see, like, I think I've got a couple of pictures of them that'll come up at some point. But yeah, there's plenty of parts and stuff floating around, so it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there were more. And sort of anecdotal evidence that I've heard is that Second World War training crews were trained out that way. And sort of at the end of the war, a lot of these tanks were sort of given to farmers for scrap or
uses tractors or tractor engines.
Yeah,
so they could
that sort of thing.
do work around the farm.
Now, Hugh, looking at your photos, I mean, the M3s are unmistakable. And in fact, right now on screen, we've got one that's even got its top turret on. The other one I could definitely spot was a Matilda from the side skirts. Is there anything there that you recognise other than being M3s and Matildas?
That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, let's not be too hard on it, because the M3 is an absolutely bizarre tank, and Matilda's a great tank, and a pile of them anywhere. And you know, you're having a go at the condition, but I've seen museums working to recondition tanks, and they're working from less than these. You know, often they're working from a a rectangle of rust, and these are still, the chassis are still very recognizable.
The tracks are still on them, and the turrets are still on them. It's, yes, you need to fit everything else out inside, but I'm sure somebody will be coming along and in the middle of the night one time and skull dragging them onto the back of a trailer and seeing what they can rebuild for themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, these things are actually worth a bit these days. I'm a little surprised they've got them there.
Yeah, well, I was talking to there's an antique shop at a little town a bit further along called Inglewood. I was talking to the guy that runs it. He sells a lot of motorbikes and car parts and that sort of thing. And he said the farmers apparently had these forever, just refuses to sell them. Whether he's sold, quite a few, as you suggest, that at one point they may have been up to a couple of hundred. But these core seats seem to just not be budging, other than moving to one side for the building of this petrol station.
Now, for the benefit of people who aren't Australians, or even Australians who, like me, don't leave the cities very often, I've done the drive to South Australia twice in my life, literally once out and once back. Can you just explain what's involved in this commute, which for you is quite regular, but it's pretty Mad Max territory for a lot of people?
Yeah, look, I once heard a ranger in a national park not too far from here describe the landscape as Mamofa. So miles and miles of F all, because there's just nothing. On the sort of Victoria, New South Wales side of Murrayville, you go through the Hay Plains and you drive through about 3 hours of just desolate. I think it's cotton fields, because I remember driving through one year and just all this cotton.
It's been rice and it's moving to cotton and whatever they can grow with terribly extracted water. But let's move on from that.
Yeah, the Hay Plains is a long, boring drive.
It's unbelievably flat.
I mean, Hay's one claim to fame is that once a year they hold the annual mini nationals for the old Morris Minis. So you get a couple of hundred mini enthusiasts meeting in Hay, because it's about halfway between Adelaide and Sydney. And they all descend on the town, and it's mini mania. But yeah, look, there's a lot of little towns, but a lot of abandoned towns, because over the years people have just drifted from these little towns to the cities.
To give a sense of just how flat and the Hay Plain is, and unremarked, there's no geography to speak of. I remember once trying to overtake a car out there, and pulled out, saw headlights approaching, pulled back in, and I think it was a good 15 minutes before the car I'd seen oncoming actually went past, because that road was just unbelievably straight and flat. So at here, we've got this town, Murrayville, and I've obviously never driven the Mallee Highway. I have gone across the Hay Plain a few times, but I just feel, Hugh, someone should be shooting a movie finale out here, chasing the, for some sort of outback horror.
I mean, it's definitely got Mad Max vibes.
Yeah.
Actually, not too far from here, there's a national park with, I think they call it the Pink Lakes, or the basically pink salt plains, which is pretty picturesque. But after you've been driving the drive itself usually takes me about 14 to 16 hours. So any excuse for a stop is usually a good one.
Yeah, but you don't stop too often, do you? In that 14 hours, it's pretty solid driving.
Yeah, you just sort of stop for fuel or tanks. Or both in this case.
Or stop for the tanks and the fuel, and not a human to be seen. So do you prepay, or do you have to prepay, I'd assume?
I actually didn't use it, to be honest. I just sort of parked my car up and made it look like I was using it, so that no one would raise any eyebrows. Because are there
restrooms there?
No, it's literally just like two big like tanks, not the vehicle tanks, like fuel tanks. And a little a regular sort of Bowser with just a card pad to pay on.
And,
yeah, right.
And what appears to be 5 M3 Lees and a Matilda sitting across the road from it, with a bunch of broken down parts in between.
And some grain silos.
Yeah.
And some grain silos.
They're like two sides of the one little field. But yeah, as you can see in this photo, there's plenty of parts and stuff floating around. And I bet if you go through some of that field, I'm sure you'd find more and more parts, but you'd probably also find a few brown snakes, I reckon.
Plenty of snakes.
I think if I needed drive sprockets for my M3, I could chase out the brown snakes. They'd be more afraid of me than vice versa. But okay, Hugh, moving on from the Murrayville wreckage, as a guest of the show, can you tell me what your favourite beer of the moment is?
My favourite beer.
Because you are coming to us from Berlin, so a town that's
yeah. Look, there's a lot of festival beers that are coming out at the moment in Germany. So I was in Kaufland the other day, which is sort of like an even cheaper version of Lidl, and there were these nice little festive beers that have spices and stuff in. But my absolute favorite beer comes from Bridge Road Brewery, and they have a series. Well, they're in Beechworth, which is I should have looked this up. Is that New South Wales or Victoria?
Victoria,
yeah.
Victoria.
Just outside of Albury.
It's on the way, but yeah, it's sort of on the way between Sydney and Melbourne, and they do this incredible. Well, they've done a series of beers. They're sort of named variants around sort of magical rainbow unicorn and that sort of thing. But they're blonde stouts, and they are fantastic. And
white stouts are one of the weirdest beers you'll ever drink because they look like a lager or a pale ale, and then it's full stout flavour. Yeah,
so good. And because I probably only go there maybe once a year, there's usually a variant of the previous years, but they usually put out an edition for Easter and another one for Christmas, and they're sort of spicy, they're fruity, but they're stouty. But like you said, John, they're just weird, but right in all the best ways.
Nice one. Now, before we let you go, Hugh, you're going to have to tell us about your favourite tank.
Honestly, I'm a bit of a fan of the Mark 1. Sorry, the Mark 4, which is,
okay.
Yeah, I guess pretty similar to the Mark 1. But
important refinements along the way. But the tank that could barely beat an A7, though. Barely beat an A7.
But it could still beat an A7.
And did you see the Mark 4 in the Trelaw Centre?
Yeah. So when I was working out there, we got to go out there occasionally. I also seen the one at Bovington. That's pretty cool.
Bovington, I mean, they've got a Mark 1 at Bovington.
That's a replica.
It's a replica. Yeah.
Is it a replica? To be fair, it was like 10 years since I was out at Bovington.
Sure. We all need to go back.
Yeah. But no, my dad's from Lincoln, so right on one of the roundabouts as you're heading up to the steep hill, which is where all the interesting stuff in Lincoln is. They've got a big monument to the tank building of that occurred in Lincoln during the First World War.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, a big sort of silhouette of a Mark 1. And I just think the Mark 4s, they were just, by modern standards, they were just so slow and so bad. I mean, top speed of something like 6 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it was the British phase which carried on with the Churchill of, hey, we can put a tiny engine in these things and gear it low enough and it'll trundle very slowly eventually where it's going.
Keep up with the infantry.
I mean, they were adaptable. They were, they had a big effect at Cambrai. And, I just think they're really interesting. And the fact that they're so rare and hard to come by, I think just sort of adds to the intrigue.
It's a classic British thing. They build a lot of these things and then they sell them all for scrap steel. And then everyone's like, hang on, history. Let us not speak of the British battleships. All
the aircraft.
Yes. Yeah, although, I mean, they still got the Lancaster flying, though, so that's something.
Yeah, soon to be a second one.
Okay, all right.
And they've the Canadians have said that once the second one is up and flying, they're going to bring theirs over. So we might see 3 Lancasters flying in formation.
See, when we talked to the chieftain, he was making the point that, when you put up a Hurricane and it's flying and something goes wrong, A, you've lost the only flying Hurricane you've got. B, a pilot's going to die. Whereas when a tank is going around a track at Tankfest and something goes wrong, it stops and it's fine.
You get the arm out and you drag it off and go figure it out.
Yeah, it's a tough thing because these Lancasters are such incredible artifacts and historical things, and to risk them with flight time. On the other hand, to see them flying is so incredible. It's a real tough balance for folks.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to see one fly for the Queen's 70th Jubilee, and just the sound of those 4 Merlins overhead. I mean, it was sort of goosebump territory.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, even one Spitfire flying overhead is something you'll never forget. But a Lancaster would really be something. All right, Hugh, thank you so much for your time. You have wonderfully acquitted the purpose of this segment, which is to let Rob and I dash up the stairs and go to the toilet in the middle of the podcast.
Great. All right, well, thanks for having me.
We truly do appreciate you sending through the pictures from Murrayville, because I don't think a lot
that was lovely.
People quite understand what a bizarre scene is out there. So we really, really appreciate that, and thank you for your time coming on to talk to us about it.
Yeah, definitely worth the drive.
If you're
it's
going
just something else.
I think it's worth the drive if I'm going to Adelaide.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers, Hugh. Thanks, mate.
See ya.
And then I said, no, we're back. Hello, folks. We're back.
Hello, people.
And it's time for beer review. All right. So today we are drinking.
Alan was very concerned we'd have a Uruguayan beer, Rob. So can you put his mind at ease? What have you got for us here?
We have Genuine Draft Miller.
Miller Draft.
Miller Brewing. Established in 1855.
One of the
It's American.
One of the most American beers, I guess we could say. It's got this. I can't put my finger on it. There's something quite fruity in the hop profile on the nose that I wasn't quite expecting.
And the print is all too small for my old eyes these days. So
yeah, I'm really struggling with that at the moment. But yes, anyway, it's Miller. It is
4 times filtered for exceptional smoothness.
Yeah. Now let's talk brewing industry stuff here. Filtering, 4 times filtering can even be a weird thing, because even craft breweries will often use a like 5 or 6 filter. So there'll be a one place I worked, it was called R2 Beer 2, and it looked like a little droid, but it was just a series of filters, and the beer just flowed through the whole lot in one go, and you can call that 5 or 6 times filtering.
So what makes a draft beer, John?
Now hang on, I was reading about that the other day. Mostly it's just draft beer is beer that's served on tap. But then you can have draft style beers that are put in cans, or in a bottle in this case.
And this one's in a clear bottle.
Bottle, which is a bad sign, as we've discussed. No good beer is ever put in a clear bottle. So a bit of a strike for Miller there. But you know what? As an easy drinking lager, albeit with this very odd aroma on the nose.
It does have a very odd aroma, doesn't it? It's almost fruity.
It's extremely fruity. Yes, Alexander Vlad wants us to get a tank shell casing beer dispenser. Alex, you're going to have to buy that for us and send it to us, is my my advice there. Send us a message via social media. We'll give you a shipping address. Okay. Now, we're into the second half of the show. A beer review. What do you think of this?
Look, it's okay, but I think that strange flavour is not to my...
Strange odour?
Yeah, it's not hugely to my liking. Either that or I just need to drink more and learn to like it that way. So...
Okay. I mean, you wouldn't... I would never walk into a bar and say, ooh, Miller. But if I'm, on the side of a highway waiting for the floodwaters to subside and the nearest shop has Miller, I'd be like, yeah, I'll buy a 6-pack and sit and watch the river go down. Anyone who's travelled in Vietnam knows that feeling. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people. Okay, now we're into the second half of the show, so I need to change the slides up.
Part deux.
There we go. Oh, no, I've got the wrong thing now.
That's what it said, part 1. Part 2's below it.
Yeah, part 2's shouldn't be there at all. I've stuffed everything up, folks. There we go. All right, that's working now. Right. Okay, so comments from people. So, what was our first podcast of the year, Rob?
Hang on. So we'll just say that... so it's at the end of the year, we thought we'd go back through the comments on Spotify and YouTube and see if there's anything we'd like to respond to this year's episodes, just for this year's episodes. All right, Japanese Type 10.
Okay, so Hans Klaus commented. Now, I would note Spotify, and this is why we're doing this, doesn't give us a chance to reply to comments by people.
Mm-hmm.
So when they make the little comments and we go, okay, we'll put that up, and I don't believe I've deleted anyone's comments, even though some people are very mean, Rob.
People are mean on the internet?
People are mean on the internet.
Tell me it's not so.
Although, you know, there's been like 80,000 people listen to our content this year, and like five of them have been mean. So
556 of them say we're their top podcast.
Well, yes, and 2,500 people. We're there. This is just on Spotify. We're in their top 10, and considering we only put a podcast out every month, that's
thanks, folks.
That's quite impressive. Thank you, folks. Anyway, so Hans Klaus, let us know for the Japanese Type 10 episode. Hey guys, love your show. I don't know if you take requests for future episodes, but I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on the Type 74 from the Japanese Self-Defense Forces. Thank you. We will get to the Type 74 in due course. Thank you for your kind words. DHK7986 said, I enjoyed the talk with Bo. That's my brother who lives in Japan. Really informative about what's going on in Japan. So-called soft specs of vehicles aren't talked about enough, and it was interesting to see the Type 10's focus in that regard. I'm only halfway through the vid, but I'm curious if the lightweight of tanks like Type 10 or K2 Black Panther will make them more suitable for the infrastructure and terrain of Ukraine, which was quite prescient at the start of the year. He then says, I heard that the 60-plus ton tanks might have issues with crossing rivers. Maybe the Poles will be nice enough to lend them some of their shiny new tanks. No one is giving Ukraine their shiny new tanks, and that's very sad. Tasman.
Here we go.
There we go. He says, good podcast, lads. Enjoyed. Sorry I was late. One word. Wife. Anyway, at the end you mentioned a World War II tank. I thought it would be apt because you talked about the M8 armoured car Tiger to non-history event. Now, not happening the way it was told, and Laserpig, in his visit to Bovington, retold the myth as if it was true.
Yep.
There were many problems Laserpig had in that weird episode, but
I'm sure it got lots of views. And that's
it got more views than we could ever dream of.
That's probably all he was caring about.
Yeah.
You got to throw in some mistakes just so that people have something to talk about.
It does.
We throw in a lot of mistakes.
Speaking of mistakes, last episode I said Echigo was an Okinawan beer, and it is not. Echigo Prefecture is in the main island of Japan, and the Echigo Brewery is the trailblazer of craft beer in Japan. It's like their Sierra Nevada. So the Japanese contingent have been letting me know I'm a complete cretin in the comments. Philippine Dreams said, John, bring some happiness to your life and block Cat Turd too. He is the Bob Semple tank of the internet troll world. Yes, even Elon Musk seems to have abandoned Cat Turd too these days, which is sad if you're Cat Turd. Vikram said, such a nuanced episode, especially because of the political context provided. I'm into deep learning. Would appreciate if you good folks could cover AI-controlled weapon systems specific to tanks. Also had an older query about why unmanned tanks are still not a reality in some future episode. Appreciate all this knowledge. I would say that you're deeply into top secret territory, and it will probably be 50 years before we start seeing public source data about AI in tanks. And in terms of autonomous tanks, I think it's just people are worried about them being hacked.
I mean, the European Union has just passed some new laws today about management of artificial intelligence and what they can and can't do. Wouldn't surprise me if they started saying, and you're not allowed to automate weapon systems with AI, because that would not be fun, boys and girls.
All right. Andre in Stase 1604 said, Japan needs to struggle and regain independence by ending a military occupation. Doormats now.
Well, Australia doesn't have so much to say about that, let's just say.
American doormats, one and all.
And yet, who do you think is giving America more money for military stuff that we don't want or need?
I mean, like building their submarine bases for them.
Yeah, Australia or Japan?
Okay, there. Moving on, the Shah B1 episode. POASDHPJWE said, hi, love your podcast, and my suggestion would be for an Australian episode about Australian World tanks in World War II. You are correct. We have talked about them a bit, and we will talk about them more. Alex said, good episode. Can you do an episode on early British tanks from 1939 to 1940?
And how bad they were. Yes, we will one day.
Yeah, okay. Paul Stewart Johnson 9 said, hey guys, you love your podcast, but could you do an episode on the Panther one, please? We did.
We did, just
there
for
you
you.
go.
Just
There
for
you
you.
go. Julian Wary said, another great episode. David Wittenberg said, nice podcast. Can't wait to hear the next one. And please do an episode about the Cromwell.
Certainly will one day.
I think 2024 might well see a Cromwell episode.
I reckon we might.
Yeah. Paolo.
When was Charles I's head cut off? Maybe we'll do it for that one.
Ooh.
We'll find a day for that.
Paolo said, very interesting. Thank you, Paolo. Hisha MG said, great show, guys. Well, it could be Hisham G. Anyway, informative and entertaining. This is my second go. I listened to the podcast first. I still don't get what's the point of the beer tube, though. Is it just a very big glass? It's a very big glass with a tap at the bottom, so we can pour the beer out of it. And it has a glycol tube to keep the beer cold. And anyway, also, it just looks fun.
It does.
And we're the only tank podcast with a beer tube. We might be the only podcast with a beer tube on YouTube. Anyway, we're just weird and we like it. And our friend Clayton from Workbench Hobbies.
When we were all up in Cairns, he saw it. We got one from the bar, and he liked the idea, and he said, "All right, I'm getting one of these for you guys, and so you can do it during the podcast." And he did, and it was lovely. And
he did, but then he completely forgot about it, and then we're like, "We ever getting this, Clayton?" He's like, "All right." Love your work, Clayton.
He's lovely, and he does some lovely videos of his own.
He's got a much bigger audience than we do. All right, Alberto said, very weird tank, to be honest. Obviously, a World War I era afterthought. On paper is good, but then again, from paper stats, you would think of it as a more conventionally laid out tank. You could say the same thing about the M3 that we were just looking at there, Rex. Sheev the Senate Palpatine said, you should do a podcast on the TKS tankette. I think we'll be scraping the very bottom of the tank barrel before we do the TKS.
I don't even know the TKS.
It's one of those ones they challenged the chieftain to get into because it's the tiniest little thing.
Oh, so it's not the Chenolette or something?
No, it's really small.
Oh, okay.
We will probably redo the hits of the past before we do the TKS, to be honest. All right, the T14 Armada episode. Beppy Lisa. I like to think this is actually a person called Lisa and not a dude, but hey, if you're a dude, that's cool too. Said, great episode. Maybe do T95 or Mouse next. Mouse might be an April Fool's sort of tank. Yeah.
T95, the hide and seek champion for 27 years.
Yeah. Someone with a very Dutch name, Povji Virveltje, said, it's great. Thank you. British underscore, now that's a username and a half, said, pretty interesting. My brother said that it used the Porsche Tiger engine. Is that true? Boy, so that's the whole Laserpig thing. No, it did not. Maybe kind of, sort of, some similarities that they both burn diesel. They're related. Okay, Bobby said, great, love them. And the
really, really good.
What?
No, sorry, Bobby, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love them and the enthusiasm about the subject. That we are enthusiasts more than anything else.
That's all. The only label you should put on us is enthusiasts.
Definitely not historians
No.
or experts. No. Arthur B said, really good. Why don't you do one on the Mouse or the IS7? Both of those are future candidates. CC Bunch of Numbers said, love your podcast, but I always miss your streams. Is there a date? Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, or Threads, or Mastodon, and you will get the dates. Josh Val said, it was great. Please do one on the HSTVLRDFLT.
There was a slash in there as well.
Yeah, what are those?
High
speed something. All right, we're going to have to look that up, Josh.
Deployment fleet.
Thank you. David Woodenberg says, great, do one for the Abrams, please. Abrams is sort of the great white whale of this podcast.
I was about to say, we'll have to work up to that one. There might be a bit more logistics involved with that one than we probably would be based on other ones. So we want to do it justice. Realistically, we want to do the Abrams justice. Therefore, will probably do more things to actually be able to do. Like,
Also, Nicholas Moran, admittedly, he was drunk at the time. Well, drunk's probably overstressing it. He had a few beers at the time. Did say he wanted to be involved in that episode.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot to organise that one.
We might wait for the next time some Abrams are shipped down to Canberra for selling something, and we'll go look at those and whatever
Get some
else.
pictures at least.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Harry Park Oakton said pretty based NGL, which means not going to lie. Based, I think, is a word of approval for the young folk.
Like Riz, or I've heard.
Riz means charisma.
Charisma,
That one's easy.
We've got Riz. Yeah, we've got Riz.
We got the Riz. Based means saying something unconventional but that you believe to be true, which is that's our thing. So cool. Russian T-3457 said, I love it, mainly the Russian tanks, since I absolutely love Russian tanks, especially the T-34. Who would have thought? Spheropol said, effing awesome. Thank you. CL4998 said, I just discovered your podcast and I fell in love. Thank you and the guest for taking the time to record this podcast. Thank you very much. Baby Green said, the similarity of certain Slavic flags is a relic of 19th century Pan-Slavism. Red, blue, and white were considered Slavic colours, and Slovenia, Slovakia, and Russia happened to have the tricolour in the same colour. Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Bulgaria took the hipster path regarding flag colours.
There you go. Now we know.
Yeah. Also, Rob, you said very mean things about Slovenia that turned out to be untrue. And the Slovenians got in touch, and that was fine. We take it all back. Slovenia is actually one of the best countries in the world for inequality and people facing skipping meals because they can't afford food. Slovenia's got it going on.
Okay.
All right. Adam Badam said Bulgaria almost has a pan-Slavic theme, except they switched blue with green. I kind of like the commonality. Okay, let's move on from that. There was a lot of flag thoughts in there.
I'm just glad people felt the need to get engaged.
Yes,
I really
indeed.
appreciate that, folks.
Yeah.
I'm learning here as well.
Yeah. Beaterific said, great podcast. Glad you guys made the jump to YouTube, though in my mind, I pictured you as the blokes from How Ridiculous. Look, in our minds, we're also the blokes from How Ridiculous.
We're much better looking than they are, and yeah.
Someone called Pump Love 81, which that's an interesting username, says, wonder why the researchers even bothered with the AI experiment to ID tanks. We talked about how they look at snow. AI models have consistently identified the entire crew of the movie Cats as cats. We make jokes about AI stuff-ups, but once they go, I am the king's hat, they're just going to eat us all. So then who'll be laughing? I always say thank you to Google when it does this for me. Daniel Vandriel said, hey, quick question. Is the Leopard 2 in your profile picture from the National Museum in Soesterberg, the Netherlands, by any chance? Pretty sure it is. Well spotted. Now we get to the Sentinel episode. And I would say the Sentinel episode is the episode I'm most proud of that we did. If only for the look of sheer terror in Rob's eyes as he realised where I was going with that episode. But not just that. I think we did some really good work there in terms of explaining Australian history to Australians. But obviously people don't like having their history explained to them. Terry Hardman said, very disappointing. I did not know what they were talking about contemporary art. Thank you, Terry, for that. JF Berg said, very disappointed. Russian T-3457 said, it was a cool episode.
There you go.
Goat said, this was an exceptional talk, gents. Very uninformative on early Australian history and interspersed with the usual laugh. Cheers, lest we forget. I think he meant to say informative.
Maybe.
CC56348 said, nice one, as always. Greetings from Austria, not Australia. Good. Then we get a bunch of people saying things like Sean Lander saying, compare the Sentinel to the first tanks made in any country. It utterly outclasses the first models on every measure. Yes, but. Okay, now here we get someone with the name of Lysander Krieg. So War Lysander. That's a worry in anyone's username. He said, could have been a great presentation except the level of groveling and apologizing. I'm not actually sure what we groveled to or apologized about.
From other people's point of view, who knows?
Yeah, indeed. Racken Snake said, leave the virtual signaling. Thanks, blokes. Silicon Slick said fist, and I think
they mean first.
Oh,
maybe first.
I thought it was a solidarity fist.
Maybe.
Yeah. And then Wild Bill Cox gave us a lengthy essay in how good the Sentinel would have been against any Japanese invasion force, which was a point we covered in the episode and we will agree with, and how great the 25-pounder Sentinels might have been.
I'm still waiting. I feel like we need to go back to the World of Tanks, folks, because they've started putting in double-barreled guns into World of Tanks, and I think we need to go back to them and say, when are we going to get the Sentinel? Because it's in there. The Sentinel. It's got the 17-pounder. It's got the 6-pounder.
Even though the 17-pounder is definitely a fantasy tank. I mean, yes, they did put
The whole point of World of Tanks is they're all fantasy tanks, all right?
Alright, okay.
But the point is,
Except
they
for the
haven't
one.
they haven't done the the 2-barreled 225-pounder.
That would be a fun one.
And
in the
I'm
game.
thinking we need to get in touch with World of Tanks and say, guys, this is your opportunity. You've got the AC, you got the tier 4, you got the tier 6, a tier 5 Sentinel with the 2-barrel guns. You're laughing. I mean, that should be an Anzac Day special that they're coming out next year. I think we need to be in touch with them, and away we go.
All right, okay, keep the scroll going, Rob.
All right. All right. Oh, we've done.
Yeah, we've covered that.
Okay, we're
Yeah,
doing it.
there was a lot on.
Bill had a lot to say about the technical. Oh wow, we're scrolling. I'm going to break this thing in a second.
Yeah, that's
The
okay. Here we
illusions.
go.
Strange.
All right. Agul 5278 felt the need to tell us that Laserpig has his sources in the description, and he made one mistake in that video. And he acknowledged this on Wikipedia isn't a source, mate. I don't think he's our mate. But look, considering the ferocious nature of Laserpig fans, and hey, we are Laserpig fans too.
And seeing him in the semi-flesh of his latest video at Bovington was hilarious.
Yeah, let's move on. Now we get to the Leopard 1 episode. Barely Amateur Productions said it is a vital contribution to the public's understanding of the Leopold. I think he meant Leopard. Titus said, I love the music, which is thanks to Luke McGrath. We'll give our annual shout out to Luke. Thank you for that. He talked about the Leopard 1 tank. Cool. STRV Enjoyer said, can you do the STRV 122 or 101 next, please? Look, if anyone buys a t-shirt from redbubble.com, search for Totally Tanked, takes a picture, shares it on social media, tags us in, they can nominate the next tank. We're going to open the field up on that. But you got to buy a shirt, wear it, and there we go. Povjivervel just said Mouse Next, so the Mouse fan club is still going. Beppy Lisa also said Mouse Next ? So there's some variation in those ones.
There you go.
Yep. CC said loved it as always. It's really funny how you always interrupt each other.
We don't.
Is it? Also, I have a slight feeling that you guys are on Reddit non-credible defense. I think we got one mention on non-credible defense, which is a Reddit big Reddit thread.
Right.
Someone was very upset that we'd said we really like the war in Ukraine to end. And if that upsets you, then you go deal with your own conscience. No, we must fight to Ukrainian victory. Oh, for God's sake. Okay. James Grantham said, I've listened to all your podcasts and only seen you guys on YouTube. Thanks for the content. I think I'll stick to the podcasts. And then a laughy face. Joking aside, your energy... He's mocking our appearance, Rob. Your energy, enthusiasm, and humor's takes do make me laugh. Thank you for that. All right, we got a Tasman special. Hey guys, that was a good podcast about one of my favorite Cold War tanks. Just a bit more info. Some people would like to know about the Leopard 1's first combat record in Bosnia by the Danes. Also, Canada did great work in the Leopard C2 version in Afghanistan, replaced by Leopard 2, and I think the Turks have used Leopard 1 tanks against PKK forces, and then see links. Thank you, Tasman. We do actually appreciate your commentary. QMJTC said, I love the shout out on my troll comment where he was offensive about our appearance. I don't think the visuals are bad. I'm just messing with you two. Thanks for continuing to pump out podcasts. I really enjoy your banter, historical points, and very unbiased commentary. Indeed. Curiosity has me. Where do you get your info from? I would love to read the source myself. As a fellow tanker and use them for my tank company mobile channel. Thanks, guys. It's a lot of stuff that's on Google. We do use Wikipedia. It is a starting point, not an end point.
No.
And
Tank archives. Tank Encyclopedia. Yeah.
Yep. Lots of sources. And then for new things happening, certainly the Drive website's Warzone page it's very American perspective, but lots of interesting information that gets out of being classified, and comments from viewers as well.
Yeah. We like to think of ourselves as an introductory point for getting into the tanks, and you can do your own research from there.
Although doing your own research has definitely become a phrase less...
I know, that was why I put it in there, John.
Thank you. All right, Rob makes a joke and John slowly gets it. Okay, the Stuart tank, Jedon said, it was awesome, love it. Our friend, Russian T-34-57, said, the Stuart is still being used in a few countries, or only one, Brazil is one of them. Camo Leader said, yeah, we did get a bit overdone using the M3 for almost everything. Joseph says, intro absolutely rocks. Thank you again to Luke McGrath. Hell's a Poppin' says, always very well done. Mile Kai said, great show until today when NAFO was mentioned. NAFO has donated tens of thousands of dollars. Have you to help Ukraine if you believe NATO's information
You're going to have to drive the
about the offense? You're sucker. Yeah, look, we don't disagree with everything the NAFO folks are on about by any means. We also have the best wishes for Ukraine, but some of the things NAFO does and the way they do them verges into racial hate.
Yeah, you don't want to go all the way down the rabbit hole, boys and girls. You want to basically make sure you're making choices that make sense rather than following the propaganda. All right, Malva's saying, great chat. Nice to have a bit of insight into what's involved for tank restoration maintenance outside of institutions.
Now, Graham has sent us a new video just today. We just didn't have time to incorporate it in the show, but we'll share it on social media.
On the CVRT from Russian T-34-57. Nice episode. I wasn't much of a fan of British light tanks. Arthur B, you're keeping history alive.
It's us. We're the only ones. No one else does history.
Ripley, you guys need to invest in better microphones. It hurts to listen to.
Oh, well.
You cats. Thumbs up. The Endcraft 4337. Smiley face. Great episode. Well done, chaps. Excuse me.
Wolfenstein said, I've loved you guys for so long, man. You deserve so much love. I'd sit at nice and listen to your podcast. Thank you, guys. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. We love you too all. We love you all.
Yep. The board Itamar says, wish I could have been there. Sadly, the hours don't match to Israel. Hey, Israeli listener. Yay.
Thank you.
Our friend QMJTC, another great episode. Please don't stop, guys. I also have to ask, I have a Discord server that is for all tank discussion. I want to know if I'm okay to share the link for it. We said yes. Keep up the good work. I love looking forward to the next one. Is that Swamp Pygmy or Swampy Gaming? Okay, Swampy Gaming. Fun fact, there is an episode of Red Dwarf where Crichton drives a tank out of a lake in Pride and Prejudice world. There you go.
I will have to find that.
I think it's the CVRT that he's talking about. Yes.
I will have to find that. I don't remember that. I will find that, and I will respect this information.
All right. Evan Warner says, do you guys have a schedule for when you do the podcast? As we've said, follow our social media.
Once a month, and we pick a day when we can both get together and we're actually around and makes sense to us both. So, yes. Yeah. But it's once a month.
Oh, Baby Coos has joined us in the live feed. Looking forward to you... your next big fight, mate. If you want to wear a Totally Tank t-shirt in the promo material, we'd be very excited. Okay, so that's in terms of the schedule for the podcast, the lives on YouTube. Follow us on YouTube would be the best way to get the notifications. Okay, in search of the perfect watch. Ah, yes. So a watch fan, he said, beside tanks and birds, the feathered kind, the other topic I'm interested in is wristwatches. I hope you guys will enjoy this combination of two of my three interests, and he sent us a link to another YouTube video. Malvers said, great stuff as always, lads, except the Carling. That beer is absolutely not for me. Yeah, I mean, I think the Carling was better than the Miller, to be honest.
Yep,
but
once we have these, we'll get something else. All right.
Okay, Panther episode, which was an absolute technical disaster. And
Baby Hugh says, hell yes, he'll rock a t-shirt. Of course you will, buddy.
Yeah. Okay, Panther episode though. Pov Gvervelt G said Zip Hansa. Grumpelskiltskin said Panzer, the first MBT changed my mind. So we've got a Zaloga right there. Definitely around that era, a lot of first MBTs were coming out one way or another. Vizor said, I know a lot of things about World War II, but this is more information. I like it. Titus said, coolest episode ever. Gustavinal said, good episode, but dry means 3 and fumph means 5, which was important information.
There you go.
We mixed those up.
Yeah. Oh, well, there we go. We're not very good.
Yeah.
Look, we speak Australian and foreign. Right now, foreign's not very good.
Mulvers said, great episode. Thank you for persevering through with the technical nightmare, which I had me questioning whether I was smart enough to do this stuff. But yes, apparently I am. Says he really enjoyed the chat with Peter. That was Peter Samsonov from the Tank Archives. He has a couple of his books. Okay, move us on. Reserver, which is Alan, I believe. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We'll keep going. Okay. Alberto said, great interview. Peter is without shadow of a doubt one of the tank nerds who I follow the most. Peter Samsonov is amazing. Tank Archives is well worth following. Sam Zing said, for all the problems that plagued the tank, it is pretty amazing that they went into production, from drawing to production in a year. That is very true. Jonas Danielson said, stay mad tankies.
Well, in Australian, stay mad. It'd be fine. Otherwise, maybe they want us to be really mad. I don't know.
Yeah. And then Alan asked us, do we know the last bit cut off? Yes, it did. The last 10 minutes disappeared for very complicated technical reasons. Won't get into here. He asked if the communist Putin nuked us. Fair question. No, we just stuffed things up. Now we move on to the Al-Khalid episode. We're nearly through, guys. Just relax. C. Jeffrey said, good episode, good tank, good guys. Oddfella said, keep up the good work. Great work, Oddfella said. CC said, very nice tank YouTube reference. Love the episode. That was when I did talking about a certain YouTuber. Zed said, please make an episode about the mouse. Thank you for reading this. Now, I just want to note, the Spotify comments, we have no capacity to reply in Spotify to. All we can do is approve them or delete them. So this is really our chance to respond. Alan noted, because we talked about how popular the Panther episode was, and there's the context when he says, my last show, Naked Women, was to my surprise my highest rated show yet. Yeah, okay. Yes, indeed. Big communist, it's really not that hard. On sale now, buy now. Cigars save lives. Always have, always will. Cheers. Alan. Muhammad Ali, this is an interesting comment, noted the Arjun Hesh round part is very confusing to me. If India wanted to use the round just for tank use, why wouldn't they make their T90s and T70s have the capacity to fire Hesh? Because Hesh works best from a rifle gun barrel. That's the answer to that question. Furthermore, when Hesh makes contact with an armor plate, it causes fragmentation. It messes up the crew's day, but it's not effective against multi-layer armor, space composite, and nearer that's non-explosive reactive armor types.
It's good against buildings.
Which Al-Khalid has. Definitely spaced armor is very well proofed against Hesh. That's a really good point. Then he notes there are multiple images of Al-Khalid with ERA mounted on its hull. And the reason we don't see the tank with ERA is because of the extra weight wearing away the drivetrain. So that's an interesting one for tanks that aren't going to be fighting serious enemies. You don't actually want them carrying all the weight of
fitted for but not with is the correct military term, whereby you might have 10 tanks, but you've only got 5 sets of ERA. So those 5 sets of ERA and or whatever other things you might say is the tank is fitted for ERA, but it's not with ERA because we've only got 5. And then if we give it to you, then we can't give it to somebody else.
Yeah, except then when the Russians discovered you actually fight a war and everyone needs it, and you're like, oh.
That's a different issue.
We'll just put some egg cartons in there.
That's a big different issue.
Yeah. Now we get to the Churchill episode. We're nearly done with this bit of the show. Okay, J1 said, keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop. I love this podcast. Thank you, Jay. KS said, you guys do a great job. Irvin said, I love this podcast. Pump Love said, what a marathon. Delightful tanksters with nuanced geopolitical opinions. I'm glad people are noting the nuance. The Scale Armourer asked, are you gentlemen heading to Scale ACT this weekend? We probably need to do more in the Scale model of space, but frankly, we're already putting pretty much all the time we have available to the show into it, and so that's something we're
a bit lazy in that regard as well. We should, if we make an effort, we should look, send us an invite. Tell us where to be when, and we'll probably make more of an effort because that way somebody else is giving us things rather than making us think of it, trying to organise ourselves.
Just do the work for us, guys.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Violzor has also noted so where do you guys live? Because the background is a museum from the Netherlands. Am I right? Correct. We're pretty sure it is. It's just a big picture of a leopard too, and that's what we went with.
Down the barrel.
Yeah. We're not the only ones who've used that image. Lots of people have used it. It's available under Creative Commons. So Rick601 Mafia said this tank FUX, so I think that means he likes it. That's the... Oh, maybe it's saying it's bad. I don't know. Hard to say what Rick's on with there. You would think a hybrid turbine to fight batteries for tea time and being extra sneaky, just a thought. Yep, I think the Russians are thinking that too. Paul Stewart Johnson said, I personally love this episode. Just wish that you guys would upload more often, but great work. Keep it up.
Hang on, we're on the T80. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So in terms of frequency, if you all want more episodes, we're going to need a real uptick in the Patreons, because it's pretty much one a month is what we've got the capacity for with the time available right now.
I don't have enough time to play computer games as it is, so anyway, taking out the hope of me playing computer games was
And then Seepel said informative and funny. Thank you for that. Tasman, once again, frequent commenter. Sorry lads, missed out on the live stream, which I've watched now, and a big thumbs up. Just thing is that the T80 wasn't the first tank in service to have a turbine jet engine. The Swedish S-tank was. Yes,
I'm pretty sure we said
agreed. Not at the time. We got that wrong in the episode.
No, but I read about that all the time.
Anyway, that Austrian guy said, hate the fact that I more or less can't watch your stream, which got me very concerned. I was like, why? Does it look that bad? And he's like, no, it's just the time. I'm from Austria, and this stream was, for example, was 8 a.m. for me. Still awesome podcast. Nice one. Mats Bernhardt said, amazing episode, which is good. Yul Goots said, great episode, and I've just subscribed to Eyes Only doing my job, which was our interview subject.
That was good.
Glad he got one out of that. Tom Bird said, nice info on the T80, but as I have noticed, your episodes are becoming more and more bloated with John's political opinions.
Hey, I have political opinions too, okay?
Okay, so how are we doing on the poll? 100%.
So that was all the comments we got for all the episodes this year. So we haven't covered this episode's comments, obviously. But yes, and then we're going to refer to the poll. 100%. The Chaffee is good. Now, can we see how many votes has come in, John? Because I can't see it on the screen.
19 votes.
19 votes said the Chaffee was good. There you go.
That's a lot of votes for this.
That is. Well, and you all agree the Chaffee was good. Well, I agree the Chaffee was good. And
a 75mm gun with the very good high explosive brand the 75 had was a real step up for light tanks at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, even though it didn't have the speed of the Hellcat, but it was out there in numbers, and it was getting to the front of the battlefield, and it could carry troops in the back. There was plenty of times where a squadron of Chaffies would pick up a company of infantry and race them down the road, and for as many as they could fit on the back of the tanks and get them into position, and away you go. So for defeating the Nazis, it was a great tank. I
don't think the Chaffee changed the result. But,
well,
that's not to take away from the qualities of the tank.
It made things easier in 45. Yeah.
I think you could make a very sound argument that tanks did not actually change the outcome of World War II.
Tasman's saying 100% the Chaffee was the best light tank of World War II. I'm quite happy to say that it's probably true. It was for a light tank.
You could say Centurion was the best medium tank of World War II, but
it was a light tank.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. We're going to move on because we've got a few more things to round up before we finish this podcast. We're at the 2 hour mark. We've got a little bit of time to talk.
We got more beer to drink. Don't worry, boys and girls. We have more beer to drink.
Ukraine. The year in review. I think one thing that's really interesting is South Korea is now providing more artillery to Ukraine than the entire European Union.
Yeah, they really didn't get their act together. Their promise of 1 million rounds for this calendar year, they've got 300,000, so they're a long way short. Whereas North Korea has provided a hell of a lot more to Russia.
Yeah, so basically the Korean Peninsula is providing all the ammunition for this conflict.
And one is being railed across and one is being floated across. Yeah.
I'm going to repeat some things I've said before, but I think it's worth repeating. The West has not given Ukraine anywhere near the resources it needs to successfully break a well-entrenched Russian line. And it needs an enormously larger air force, and it needs more than 30 tanks here and 12 tanks there. Given that the Russians are adding 500 tanks a year to their inventory and have a vastly...
bloody long-range missiles and take out the Kerch Bridge and say, yep, now support the Crimean Peninsula without that rail line. Try now, and then that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, there's a lot more support Ukraine could have been given, and if they are serious about changing the outcome of this conflict, it's going to need a massive escalation in the amount of support they're getting, because Russians have a lot of artillery, they have a lot of mines, they've built a very strong defensive line, and cracking that is a big job. I mean, you want to go back to cracking a line like that, you're looking at Second Battle of El Alamein, where they had to have 3-1 superiority and an enormous material superiority to
and
succeed.
Krabson's comment of the US not carrying through on their funding for Ukraine the last week of Congress, yeah, you're right. It's a bit of a poison pill that they're trying to push through.
Well, fundamentally, we will get to the Gaza war in a second, but Ukraine's in a bad position that is not of their making. The whole war was not one of their making. And let's probably leave it at that, except that the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And when you're going to fight wars, you've got to have, achievable objectives. And at this point, I question whether Ukraine's objectives, which is, driving the Russians out of every inch of Ukrainian soil and out of Crimea, is achievable with anything like the resources they have available, at which point they need to think of something else. And as Big Surge on his Substack has been saying, Ukraine is now a position where they cannot attack. It's becoming dubious as to whether they can defend. If you can't attack or defend, your choices are surrender or retreat. And I say that wishing all the best for Ukraine, but
or come up with another point of attack is that you get them all on jet skis or whatever bloody platform it is to get onto the Crimean Peninsula with logistical support and hit them in the soft where there aren't minefields and embedded trenches.
Yeah, or you need an enormous number. You need a lot of air support. You need a lot of sappers. As Montgomery said, there are never enough sappers.
No. Well, I'm assuming he was meaning combat engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's our thoughts on Ukraine. We're gonna move on from that. I just don't want to see another 100,000 young Ukrainians bleeding out on the Surovikin line to suit the agendas of a bunch of people in Washington or London. I think that's a bad outcome.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So from that happy topic, Rob, there's been a few
there was a
videos.
ceasefire. There was a ceasefire. At least there was some movement of saying, let's not just kill everybody right away.
And for an unpopular opinion, it once again proved that Hamas are in fact capable of sticking to their word, doing what they say. Hamas behaved itself quite admirably through the. I know that Hamas did atrocious things in October.
The whole point was to do atrocious things so that they could get everybody's attention focused on.
There is also a lot of suggestion from oil trade analysts that there was some very clever hedging by people who knew that attack was going to happen that made billions of dollars for people.
Well, it's surprising the number of reports coming out about Israeli intelligence saying, yeah, we knew about this sort of stuff from last year, and we saw them doing rehearsals for it 6 weeks before the attack, and you know what? We tried to do something about it, but nobody wanted to listen. So anyway, it's all bad. And we feel very sorry for all the people involved, from the people on the ground, from the people who were taken by Hamas, from the Gazans who are being bombed by the Israeli Defense Force. Really, there needs to be a better solution than Bibi saying, well, I'm on the nose a bit for politically, so what I'll do is let an attack go through, and that way everybody will be back behind me. Because like Stalin, and I want to say Putin, he's a guy who will deal in real politics and say, power is where power is. He doesn't care. But that's my thoughts.
I think a lot of people are making money on this conflict, as all wars are rackets. A bunch of shareholders make a fortune, and a bunch of young people, almost if they're lucky, lose their lives versus being maimed for life, which is an entirely live option. And we do a tank podcast. We keep saying this. We are not peacenik freaking hippies. But we also think that wars should have achievable objectives, and that those objectives should be worth the price. Now, who determines the price and who pays the price gets into some real murky territory. But anyway, that's one last thing on Gaza. The Israeli D9 armored bulldozers are the once again the real heroes of urban combat. Certainly from an Israeli perspective, they're incredibly effective things for just, knocking down the buildings and making the urban warfare moot. And once again, have been really effective. And I think the biggest celebrations I've seen...
Well, D9s is mainly, you want to be clearing rubble and allowing access to fewer further troops to get to where they want to be. Just like the Uruguayan dozer-bladed Chaffee, you want to clear the streets in order to be able for all the rest of your forces to be able to get in there quick, do the thing, and grab people and shoot people or whatever else they wanted them to do. Because as the chieftain mentioned in plenty of his videos, tanks don't like driving through buildings because there are basements. And as soon as you have a heavy tank going over a lightly constructed basement, it falls in and cannot get out. I've fallen and cannot get up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Now, we did have a question from Tasman about Venezuela possibly invading Guyana. I think it would be Rishi Sunak's wet dream to be able to fight a war in South America and distract from his miserable... Because British Guiana is part of the Commonwealth and has defence treaties with the UK.
Really?
Yeah. So I think Venezuela's saber rattling. I would be surprised if they actually launch an attack over the border, but there's a lot of oil, and it turns out that even though we're all meant to be phasing out oil to go renewable to save the planet so none of us all die,
Venezuela's like the fourth highest oil producing country in the world.
Yeah, which means they
Behind
love oil.
Saudi Arabia, Russia, America, they are number 4.
Yeah.
So what do they need more for?
They need more because it's more money, and they've already got the infrastructure. So when you've already got the infrastructure, you want more of the oil.
Now, who's in charge of Venezuela this day? Is it the CIA?
Maduro.
Is he the CIA man, or is he the socialist?
Notionally socialist. I think he's very socialist. But anyway, I don't think Venezuela's going to invade Guyana, but I'm willing to accept I could be wrong on that. That's not a very firm thought there. Okay, so just as a parting thought for Christmas, I've got a little quote I wanted to share. And for those who, pretty much everyone who follows this channel has read Lord of the Rings, but I'm just going to read some thoughts I had this morning that seem pertinent from Tolkien from The Two Towers. This is Faramir saying this. I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. And when people say to me, why are you doing a podcast about tanks? A lot of it is, it's not that I love tanks attacking people or killing people or ending democracies. It is the things that the tanks can be used for that are worth protecting. So I wanted to share that as a little Christmas thought with you as we wrap up for the year. Cool. Rob, anything else you got that you want to say?
The Chaffee is a special little unicorn, and it's a joy to drive in World of Tanks. When you get to circle strafing, that tier 10 behemoth that you can just get through the rear armor of it as it tries to traverse its turret to get a shot at you as you're racing around at 56 k's an hour on it and saying, well, sucks to be you, buddy, and to be killed by a tier 5. It was a special moment.
All right. Okay. I really want to thank everyone who's been with us through this episode online. We really do appreciate you folks, and thank you for all the comments, even the ones we didn't take a second to read from. And on that note, I really hope everyone has
safe.
Everyone who observes Christmas has a good Christmas. Those who don't, I just hope you have a nice rest of December.
Be safe. We'll see you again in January, and looking forward to finding out what the next tank is.
Yeah. No idea. Send us some more comments. We can ignore them till next December.
Thanks, Antonio. We hope you have a good Christmas too. Good night.